What if the secret to your ongoing emptiness lies in the archetype of the eternal girl? This may sound abstract, but it could explain why you feel stuck, chasing fleeting pleasures and avoiding the deeper work of stepping into your own power. In this video, we'll explore Carl Jung's fascinating idea of the puella eterna, the eternal girl, and why overcoming her is the most important step toward true maturity. Some women seem to live in a state of endless possibility, spontaneous, magnetic, and full of restless energy. On the surface, their lives are vibrant, but there's often a subtle sense of being stuck, as if something important remains unresolved beneath all that charm. This pattern isn't just the result of quirks or random life events. As Jung, and especially Marie-Louise von Franz, observed, the eternal girl archetype often springs from childhood wounds or overprotective parenting that halts emotional growth. When a girl grows up without the chance to build resilience, either because she's shielded from difficulty or left to cope with trauma alone, her development can freeze. The result is a psychological state that values perpetual youth over the messier work of growing up. The puella eterna, or eternal girl, is the feminine counterpoint to the more familiar puer eternus, the eternal boy. While the puer is known for his refusal to settle, the eternal girl expresses her resistance differently. She radiates lightness, creativity, and a sense of floating above the ordinary. Yet this isn't just about being playful or idealistic. It's a deep-seated fixation on staying young, a way of avoiding the responsibilities, commitments, and limitations that adulthood brings. Von Franz describes how this archetype resists routine and predictability because they threaten her romantic fantasies. She prefers to live in a world of potential, not actualization, a place where nothing is pinned down and every option remains open. Instead of listing every trait, let's be clear. The eternal girl archetype is defined by a reluctance to commit, a craving for external validation, and a tendency to avoid emotional depth. She may appear carefree and spontaneous, but beneath the surface, there's an ongoing effort to sidestep the discomfort of real responsibility. For instance, von Franz described women who idealize perfect romance yet withdraw at the first sign of real intimacy, an illustration of how the puella eterna defends against vulnerability. This avoidance isn't always conscious. It often feels like self-protection, a way to keep pain and disappointment at bay. The roots of this pattern stretch back to early life. Childhood trauma, whether it's neglect, instability, or simply a lack of emotional modeling, can disrupt the natural process of growing up. If a girl never learns to trust her own judgment or to weather setbacks, she might build a persona to survive. This persona is charming, naive, and always seeking approval. Over time, it hardens into the eternal girl archetype, trapping her in a cycle of seeking pleasure and validation while avoiding the risk of deeper connection or personal change. Consider a woman who is always the center of attention, effortlessly moving from one project or relationship to the next, always chasing novelty. She seems adventurous, but when any situation begins to require real commitment or vulnerability, she pulls away. What looks like spontaneity is often fear. Fear of being seen, fear of losing control, and fear of the unknown that comes with genuine intimacy. The moment things get real, she retreats. This pattern repeats, leaving her in a loop of beginnings without endings, excitement without fulfillment. The eternal girl archetype clings to the illusion of freedom, mistaking endless options for empowerment. But the truth is, this freedom can become a prison. Without roots or responsibility, she floats from one experience to another, always searching, but never arriving. The more she avoids settling, the more dissatisfied she becomes. She tells herself that staying uncommitted is a sign of strength, but it's often just a way to keep her fears at a distance. The lightness, the charm, the focus on short-term pleasure, all serve as shields against the pain and unpredictability of real life. This isn't a conscious choice for most women. The avoidance feels safer than the alternative. Real maturity, self-awareness, accountability, emotional resilience can seem overwhelming if you've never been shown how to develop it. The eternal girl is not simply a personality, she's a defense, a way of coping with a world that once felt unsafe or unmanageable. Yet the cost of this defense is high. The longer she stays in this pattern, the harder it becomes to step into adulthood and claim the deeper rewards of mature living. Von Franz points out that the eternal girl's resistance to routine and predictability isn't just about boredom. It's a rejection of anything that threatens her inner world of fantasy, where everything remains possible and nothing is ever truly tested. This fantasy protects her from disappointment, but also keeps her from real growth. The more she invests in this illusion, the more fragile she becomes. Underneath the surface, insecurity and fear replace genuine confidence. If you recognize these patterns, in yourself or in someone you know, it's worth pausing to reflect. The eternal girl isn't a villain, and she's not beyond hope. Her story is one of survival, not malice. Still, if the shield never comes down, it becomes a barrier. Real change begins with understanding where these patterns come from and why they persist. But these inner dynamics don't exist in a vacuum. The world around us often amplifies them. Modern culture, with its relentless focus on youth and charm, makes it even harder to break free from the eternal girl's shadow. The next question is, why does society seem to encourage women to stay stuck in this pattern? Modern life surrounds women with signals that shape how they see themselves and how they believe they should move through the world. The eternal girl archetype is not just a personal pattern, it's a reflection of what society rewards and repeats. The cultural machinery that glorifies youth, beauty, and a sense of carefree femininity is ever present. Everywhere you look, there's a subtle, persistent message. A woman's value is highest when she is young, attractive, and desirable, and it declines as she grows older or steps more fully into her authority. Media and advertising play a central role in this. Movies rarely center mature women as the embodiment of fulfillment or wisdom. Instead, it's the youthful heroine whose story is celebrated. Beauty ads don't just sell products, they sell the idea that aging is a problem to be fixed. Brands targeting women over 30 often promise a return to 20, reinforcing Jung's idea that the Puella's fear of aging is culturally amplified. The subtext is clear. To remain relevant, you must resist the natural process of growing up. These images and messages accumulate, shaping expectations and quietly encouraging women to suppress the signs of maturity and the complexity that comes with it. Social media intensifies this pressure. Platforms like Instagram and TikTok are filled with influencers curating a vision of perpetual youth and spontaneity. The eternal girl persona thrives in these environments. She is always living her best life, effortlessly charming, never weighed down by real responsibility. The effect is a constant comparison, a silent competition to appear as youthful and light as possible. This isn't just about looks, it's about projecting a mindset that avoids seriousness, depth, or the appearance of struggle. Over time, this can create a gap between the image a woman projects and the reality she experiences. The psychological impact of these cultural messages is profound. When you are encouraged to prioritize being likable, agreeable, and youthful, it becomes easy to neglect or even hide parts of yourself that don't fit the mold. Assertiveness, ambition, and independent thinking are often discouraged, especially if they threaten the image of effortless femininity. The result is a kind of identity dissonance. The outer persona becomes increasingly disconnected from the inner self. You may find yourself performing a role that feels safe and rewarded, while the deeper, more complex parts of your identity are left unexplored or suppressed. This identity gap isn't just theoretical. It can lead to a sense of inauthenticity, loneliness, and dissatisfaction. Women may feel as if they are always on, constantly monitoring their appearance and behavior, to align with an ideal that is impossible to maintain. The pursuit of external validation becomes a trap, one that promises belonging and acceptance, but delivers anxiety and a sense of emptiness. The curated image starts to feel less like a choice and more like a requirement, a mask that cannot be removed without risking rejection or criticism. In professional settings, the cost of outgrowing the eternal girl archetype becomes even clearer. Psychologists note mature women are labeled too much when they assert authority, another way culture punishes growth. A woman who leads with confidence and decisiveness may be seen as cold or unlikable, while those who maintain a more agreeable, youthful persona are often praised for their charm, but not taken seriously. This double standard creates a no-win situation. Real maturity is penalized, while the performance of youth is rewarded, but ultimately limiting. As women move through life and encounter milestones that naturally call for growth, turning 30, navigating career changes, or entering new relationships, the tension between internal development and external expectations intensifies. The cultural script insists that aging diminishes value, and many women feel compelled to cling to the eternal girl persona even as it becomes less sustainable. Instead of embracing change, there's a pull to remain in a state of suspended animation, holding on to a chapter that should have evolved. The contradiction at the heart of this cultural message is hard to ignore. On one hand, the eternal girl archetype is celebrated as the ideal, light, free, and endlessly appealing. On the other, the reality of life is that aging and growth are unavoidable. The longer the persona is maintained, the more it strains under the weight of experience and time. The cracks begin to show. What once felt effortless becomes exhausting. The sense of freedom promised by the eternal girl archetype turns out to be a narrow corridor, one that closes off richer, more grounded forms of fulfillment. This is the hidden cost of cultural reinforcement. The longer you perform the eternal girl, the greater the distance between who you are and who you appear to be. The pursuit of endless youth and external approval may offer short-term comfort, but it can leave you feeling fragile, uncertain, and alone. The rewards of conformity are real, but so are the consequences: anxiety, depression, and a persistent sense that something essential is missing. But what happens when the persona cracks under time's pressure? What's left when the charm fades and the mask slips? In the next part, we'll explore the hidden pain behind the eternal girl's allure and what it truly costs to maintain the facade. What does it feel like when the applause dies away? When the room empties and the performance ends, what remains behind the charm? For the eternal girl, the answer is often uncomfortable. Her laughter and magnetism draw people in, but the moment she is alone, a different reality surfaces, one marked by fragility and a persistent sense of disconnection. The emotional cost of living within this archetype emerges most clearly in these quiet moments when there's no audience left to impress and no external validation to fill the silence. Charm, for her, isn't just a personality trait. It's a shield, carefully constructed from whimsy, allure, and wit. Its purpose is to deflect criticism, responsibility, and especially the moments that demand she look inward. The mask is not always a conscious choice. For many women, it's a survival strategy that began early. As explored in research and by Jungian analysts like von Franz, unresolved trauma or overprotective parenting can create a world that feels inherently unsafe. In response, the eternal girl persona emerges, offering the illusion of safety. Vulnerability, once punished or ignored, becomes something to avoid at all costs. But the protection this persona offers is never free. It requires constant upkeep, and the effort is draining. Consider the woman who appears to excel in her career. She's the one everyone describes as so easy to work with, always upbeat, always ready with the perfect response. On the surface, she seems unstoppable. Yet, as von Franz observed, the Puella channels anxiety into maintaining her facade of brilliance, masking an existential void. Behind closed doors, she may be consumed by self-doubt, perfectionism, and the fear that her true self will be found lacking. Without the tools to examine her deeper insecurities, she pours all her energy into keeping up appearances while her internal world grows more fragile. The same pattern appears in her relationships. She thrives in the honeymoon phase, but flees at the first call for vulnerability, echoing the researcher's note on her cycle of idealization and rejection. The spark and playfulness that make her irresistible at first eventually give way to avoidance and withdrawal when deeper intimacy is required. Vulnerability, in her world, is a threat. To reveal her insecurities or needs would be to risk losing the approval she's worked so hard to earn. So she keeps things light, surface level, and safe, never allowing anyone close enough to see the parts of herself she's afraid to confront. This avoidance isn't limited to romantic relationships. Socially, the eternal girl craves novelty and excitement. New friendships, new interests, new experiences, these are her comfort zone. But novelty fades, and the obligations that come with maintaining real connections inevitably arise. For someone rooted in this archetype, obligations feel like pressure, and pressure feels suffocating. As soon as stability or routine threatens to take hold, she retreats, preferring the safety of fleeting connections where charm alone is enough. This isn't simply immaturity. It's a defense mechanism that keeps her from facing the deeper, more complicated work of understanding herself. Over time, the cost of this avoidance mounts. The mask that once felt empowering becomes exhausting to maintain. Emotional exhaustion sets in, and the constant need for validation leaves her feeling hollow. The background research highlights that the eternal girl's charm is a defense mechanism, one that conceals emotional immaturity and shields her from the discomfort of introspection. But this shield also perpetuates her struggles, trapping her in a cycle where the very behaviors meant to protect her become the source of her pain. Meaningful connection becomes harder to achieve. Emotional immaturity creates barriers not only to intimacy with others, but also to self-understanding. Vulnerability feels like an insurmountable risk, so she limits her relationships to what feels manageable, surface-level interactions that never threaten her carefully constructed persona. The inability to access and process her own emotions deepens her sense of incompleteness. Introspection is unfamiliar, even intimidating territory. Unresolved aspects of her personality, her shadow in Jungian terms, remain hidden, and she is left with the feeling that something essential is missing from her life. The longer she remains in this cycle, the more isolating her charm becomes. What once brought her admiration and a sense of freedom now isolates her, making it difficult to form lasting bonds or find real satisfaction. The article 16 Signs of Emotional Immaturity points out that emotionally immature individuals struggle with vulnerability and emotional regulation, leading to repeated patterns of self-sabotage. For the eternal girl, these struggles reinforce her sense of disconnection. Each failed relationship or fleeting success only strengthens the belief that fulfillment is always just out of reach. There's a paradox at the core of the eternal girl's experience. The charm that once protected her now prevents her from fully engaging with life. It's a double-edged sword, a tool that shields her from pain, but also keeps her from genuine fulfillment. The persona becomes so ingrained that she struggles to imagine herself without it. Letting go would mean confronting fears she's long avoided, the fear of being ordinary, the fear of failing, and the fear of losing the freedom her charm has always promised but never truly delivered. Pause and ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly seen without performing? That discomfort signals where your puella mask may still be in place. The alluring mask of the eternal girl may offer protection, but it also creates distance from others and from her own potential. Recognizing this pain is the first step toward something different. Yet, what comes after recognition? What does it actually mean to move beyond the eternal girl and into maturity? The next step requires facing the possibility that growth means letting a part of yourself go, a part you may have clung to for years. The process Jung called individuation stands at the center of leaving the eternal girl behind. Individuation is not about changing into someone new, but about becoming whole, integrating every part of yourself, even those you've denied or hidden. For anyone shaped by the eternal girl archetype, this means facing the shadow, the fears, disappointments, and insecurities that you've spent years avoiding. It's a direct confrontation with the parts of yourself that have been kept in the dark. This is where the real work begins. Marie-Louise von Franz wrote that the maiden must die symbolically to allow the great mother or queen to emerge, signifying maturity's rebirth. This symbolic death is not about rejecting youth or femininity, but about letting go of the childish ego that clings to fantasy, seeks constant validation, and resists the weight of responsibility. The eternal girl thrives in possibility, in the safety of maybe, but individuation demands a move toward commitment and reality. The transition is painful because it requires surrendering the comfort of old habits and the illusions that kept you feeling safe, even as they kept you stuck. The first subpoint is this: the symbolic death of the maiden. This is the hardest part. You are asked to release the persona that has protected you for so long. The eternal girl archetype is seductive because it promises endless options and the thrill of being desired, but it also keeps you from depth, from building, from lasting satisfaction. The death is not dramatic or obvious. It shows up quietly, in the moments when you choose honesty over charm, stability over novelty, and depth over surface. It's the decision to stop escaping into fantasy or external approval and to sit with the discomfort of reality. This can feel like a loss, and in many ways it is. The loss of a certain kind of innocence, the comfort of being cared for, or the illusion that you can always start over without consequence. The emotional resistance here is real. The eternal girl's fear of aging, of losing her desirability, and of being pinned down are all amplified by cultural messages that equate youth with value. To move beyond this, you have to see these fears for what they are: projections, not truths. Maturity asks you to find value in qualities that deepen with time: wisdom, resilience, the ability to nurture and transform. This is where individuation becomes an act of courage. You are not erasing the maiden, but allowing her to step aside so that something larger and more integrated can take her place. The second subpoint is the emergence of the queen or great mother archetype. After the symbolic death, something new is possible. The queen archetype is not about ruling others, but about ruling yourself. taking responsibility for your choices, your emotions, and your life's direction. Where the maiden is defined by potential and the need for approval, the queen is defined by self-sufficiency, depth, and the ability to sustain herself and others. She embodies nourishment, wisdom, and the capacity to create and transform. This shift is not about becoming hard or losing all lightness. It's about integrating the creativity and wonder of the maiden with the strength and steadiness of maturity. Picture the difference. The eternal girl is like a sapling, flexible but easily bent by every gust of wind. The queen is like a tree with deep roots, still growing, still alive, but able to withstand storms. She no longer needs to chase validation because she finds value within. This is not a rejection of youth, but a recognition that life's richness comes from embracing its full cycle, including the challenges and responsibilities that come with age. Let's make this concrete. Like the friend who changed jobs 5 times by 35, she recognizes the pattern and chooses a single project to completion, confronting her fear of permanence. She notices how she's always been the one to end relationships before they get serious, and instead, she allows herself to stay, to work through conflict, to risk being seen as imperfect. Therapy or self-reflection brings up old wounds, fear of rejection, fear of failure, the belief that she's only lovable when she's pleasing or exciting. Instead of running from these feelings, she faces them. She learns to sit with discomfort, to say yes to commitments, and to accept that growth means giving up the fantasy of endless options. The illusions that break during individuation are often the most painful. The eternal girl's attachment to youth is not just about appearance, but about the illusion of infinite possibility. When you realize that not every door can stay open forever, there's grief, but there's also relief. You no longer have to maintain the exhausting performance of being everything to everyone. You can begin to value the depth that comes from staying, from building, from letting yourself be known. Control is another illusion that must be surrendered. The eternal girl avoids commitment to maintain the feeling of freedom, but real freedom comes from choosing, from being grounded enough to withstand the consequences of your decisions. Maturity is the willingness to take responsibility and to stop waiting for someone else to rescue you or give your life meaning. This is where individuation moves from theory to practice. You move from maybe to yes, from avoidance to action. There is grief in letting go of the eternal girl, but there is also a new sense of possibility. When you stop running from yourself, you make space for a self that is more honest, more complex, and more capable of real connection. Von Franz emphasizes that healing begins when you commit to something greater than your own fantasies, a relationship, a vocation, a creative project, or a spiritual path. The point is not what you choose, but that you choose and that you stay with it long enough to grow. This transition is not about losing the joys of youth, but about carrying them forward in a more grounded, integrated way. The pain of letting go is real, but so is the transformation that follows. You trade the anxiety of endless beginnings for the satisfaction of seeing something through. You move from dependency to autonomy, from surface to substance. But moving beyond metaphor requires action. Let's look at how to take those first steps. Real change starts with practical steps, small, deliberate actions that slowly dismantle the old patterns of the eternal girl. The truth is, these steps are not glamorous. They're often uncomfortable, sometimes tedious, and always revealing. But if you want to move beyond the surface and build something real, this is the work that matters. There are 3 core practices that make the difference. Journaling to track your patterns, mindfulness to break reactive cycles, and boundary setting to reclaim your time and energy. Each one addresses a different layer of the archetype's hold. Begin with journaling. This isn't about writing beautiful sentences or keeping a diary for nostalgia. It's a tool for self-examination. Set aside time each day to write down not just what happened, but how you felt and what you wanted to do in response. Note recurring moments when you feel the urge to escape. These reveal your Puella triggers. Maybe you notice a pattern. When a conversation turns serious, you change the subject. When a project gets difficult, you start looking for something new. When someone asks for more of you, you suddenly feel exhausted. These aren't just quirks, they're signals. The more you write, the clearer the patterns become. Over time, you start to see not just what you do, but why you do it. That's the first opening for change. Mindfulness is the next layer. This practice is not about emptying your mind or achieving perfect calm. It's about paying attention to what's happening inside you without running from it or trying to fix it immediately. As the Reflections blog advises, accept how you feel in the moment without judgment to break reactive cycles. When you feel anxiety rising, or the urge to perform, or the impulse to withdraw, pause. Notice what's happening in your body and your mind. Let the feeling be there. Don't label it as good or bad. Just observe. Mindfulness helps you create a gap between feeling and reaction. In that space, you get to choose your next move, rather than defaulting to the old script. Over time, this builds resilience, the ability to stay present with discomfort instead of escaping it. Setting boundaries is the third practice, and for many, it's the most challenging. If you've spent years seeking approval or avoiding conflict, boundaries can feel unnatural, even selfish. But they are essential if you want to move beyond the eternal girl's cycle of avoidance. If you habitually agree to superficial plans, practice saying no to protect your time and start building deeper commitments. This might mean turning down invitations that drain you, stepping back from relationships that never move beyond the surface, or refusing extra work when your plate is already full. Each no is an act of self-respect, a way of telling yourself that your time and energy matter. Boundaries are not walls. They are the lines that define where you end and someone else begins. Without them, you lose yourself in the needs and expectations of others. These practices, journaling, mindfulness, and boundaries, are not quick fixes. They require repetition. You will slip back into old habits. That's normal. The point is not perfection, but persistence. Each time you notice a pattern, pause before reacting, or say no to something that doesn't serve you, you are chipping away at the old persona and making space for something more authentic. Over time, the discomfort fades and is replaced by a quiet confidence, a sense that you know yourself and that you are living in alignment with what matters to you. Therapy can amplify these efforts. A skilled therapist helps you untangle the roots of your patterns, offering perspective and support as you practice new ways of being. Therapy is not about fixing you, it's about giving you the tools to understand yourself and to make conscious choices. If therapy isn't accessible, seek out trusted friends who will hold you accountable and encourage your growth. Sometimes, just saying your fears out loud is enough to loosen their grip. Communication is another area that transforms as you practice these steps. Start noticing how you speak. Do you use I statements, or do you default to blaming or deflecting? Practice expressing your needs directly, even if it feels awkward. Emotional maturity grows when you allow yourself to be seen, not just for your charm or lightness, but for your real thoughts and feelings. This is how authentic relationships are built, not on performance, but on honesty and vulnerability. There's also value in taking a relationship inventory. Look at the connections in your life. Which ones encourage growth? Which ones keep you stuck? Sometimes the hardest step is letting go of relationships that reinforce the old patterns. It's a loss, but it creates space for new connections that support your evolution. As you practice these steps, you will encounter resistance. That's inevitable. The eternal girl archetype does not give up easily. When you feel the urge to escape, to smooth things over, or to retreat into fantasy, pause and ask yourself, which one of these first steps feels most intimidating, and why? Naming that fear is the beginning of change. The process of breaking free is gradual. It's built from small moments, pages filled with honest reflections, awkward conversations where you finally say what you mean, quiet pauses where you let yourself feel instead of fleeing. Each moment is a step toward something deeper and more integrated. The journey doesn't end here. It's an ongoing process, one that demands your attention and your willingness to be uncomfortable. But the reward is real, a life that feels grounded, authentic, and whole. This is the foundation for everything that comes next.